Hello guys, Flanker here. Today we're going to talk about several controversial topics that have been heavily debated for a very long time. Corruption and flagging systems, griefing, and risk versus reward. Ashes of Creation attracted a huge number of players, and all those players have a different gaming background. Therefore, some people express certain concerns about the possibility of griefing in-game. If you're one of those people, make sure to watch this video till the end so that you fully understand all aspects of the in-game systems and the logic behind them. It's important to analyze them properly and don't take anything out of context to avoid any misconceptions. Before we start, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more. Alright, so the idea of having this flagging system, where did it come from?
What we tried to do, or what I've tried to do, is take a system that I experienced in the past and refine it in such a way where the large portion of griefing that had the potential to occur in previous systems is mitigated even further.
In this video, Steven talks about Lineage 2 that had the same flagging system and making certain amends to disincentivize griefing even more. Despite the fact that the system worked pretty well in Lineage 2, and I say that as someone who played it for more than 12 years, there was definitely a room for improvement. Based on what we know already, I'm like 99% sure that it's gonna be much better in Ashes of Creation, and here is 5 reasons why. In order to hit another player in Lineage 2, you had to use a forced attack. That applied to basic attacks and single target skills, but not to AoE skills. As a result, if a purple player entered the area of another player's AoE attack, that player would flag as well. Fortunately, it's not going to be a problem in Ashes of Creation. The consequences of killing another player in Ashes of Creation will be much more severe. In Lineage 2, you suffered the same death penalty when you died while being corrupted. In Ashes of Creation, corrupt players suffer death penalties at 4 times the rate of non-combatants. Under normal circumstances, the experience stat upon death is expected to be around 2-3%, which basically means that if you die while being red, it's going to be around 10%. On high levels, those 10% may be equal to an hour of grinding, and this fact alone will make a lot of players think twice before killing someone for no reason. Lineage 2 didn't have a bounty hunter system, but Ashes of Creation does. This imposes an additional risk to corrupt players because bounty hunters will be able to see their location on the map. Moreover, corrupt players will not be able to escape the fight by logging out, as there will be a 60-second logout timer. And finally, removing the corruption through XP grinding will take significantly longer comparing to Lineage 2, and this will provide plenty of time for bounty hunters to find a corrupt player. Also, in Lineage 2, if a high-level player killed a low-level player, the consequences of that would be the same. However, in Ashes of Creation, the wider level disparity between the players leads to more corruption. In Lineage 2, some players had ults specifically for killing others. Also, it wasn't difficult to buy a character for that purpose because many servers had problems with RMT. Ashes of Creation most likely won't have that problem because corruption score has a scaling impact on skills and stat dampening that will eventually make a corrupt player ineffective in PvP. In addition to the things we already mentioned, there is one more that I would probably add to make the whole system perfect. Currently, the health bar of a player is visible to players outside of his group, and that can be very helpful to potential griefers as you can intentionally keep someone's HP low with little to no risk of killing them. Just wait for the right moment, for example when a party is fighting a group of mobs, and focus their tank or a healer. This wouldn't be possible if player's HP bar could be only seen by members of his party or raid. Moreover, with invisible health bars, it would be possible to keep your own HP low when necessary, bait the enemy to attack and kill you with one hit, attack him when he turns red without any consequences, and have a chance to drop his gear. Under these circumstances, both sides end up having risk and reward, and griefing becomes less likely. I hope this makes sense, and I'm curious what you think about it, so feel free to share your thoughts and opinions in comments. Now, let's move forward and listen to Steven talking about risk.
Risk is a healthy thing. Risk makes us value reward. Without risk, we would not pursue certain achievements because anybody could achieve them.
Makes perfect sense to me. If something is easy to achieve, then everyone can have it, and if everyone can have it, then it's no longer valuable or attractive. This is a reason why some people would take a photo of a Lamborghini parked on the street. If everyone had a Lamborghini, or it was possible to buy it for $100, then nobody would ever do that.
Risk makes us have a sense of thrill or have some sense of anxiety, right? And those are all emotional responses that get elicited when risk is present. So risk isn't a bad thing. We like risk.
Here's an important thing to keep in mind, especially if you're new to the game with the concept of risk versus reward. We all have an emotional level that changes over time depending on the situations and circumstances we face. If you play a game with little to no risk, where everyone is a winner and you don't have to invest time or significant efforts to achieve something, the range of your emotional oscillations is basically capped. You won't feel extremely happy and you won't get deeply disappointed. For example, completing Witcher 3 or any other game on easy difficulty level just wouldn't feel the same comparing to hardcore difficulty. When it comes to Ashes of Creation, or basically any other game that involves the concept of risk versus reward, the range of the emotional oscillations is much wider. There are many known and unknown variables that may and will affect your gameplay. As a result, not everything may go as planned and some of your expectations may fail. At the same time, achieving your goals in Ashes of Creation will bring much more satisfaction comparing to some casual games. Therefore, it's important to understand how capable you are when it comes to handling those emotional roller coasters and adjust your gameplay accordingly.
Risk is good not just in PvP, but in PvE as well. When you can't always predict the environment or encounter that you're a part of, risk is something like, I've never seen this boss do that before, or, these ads came at an ill-placed time, or there's a trap here that, I didn't experience before. There's a lot of elements that risk introduces that keep gameplay less stale, that keep it more dynamic, that introduce environments where the unexpected can occur.
As far as we know, around 80% of the content in Ashes of Creation is open world, and that will lead to the competition for good farming locations and bosses. It's always interesting and challenging to face a new boss for the first couple of times, but later, it often becomes a chore because you're already familiar with his mechanics and you know how to kill him. Fortunately, it will never be boring in Ashes of Creation. How can I possibly know that? Well, the majority of content in Lineage 2 was open world, so it was always fun. And by saying always, I mean every single time. It wasn't difficult for a decent guild to spend an hour and kill a world boss. The thing is, there were other guilds that wanted to do that as well. So very often, there was a massive battle with hundreds of players that could last hours, and the winner got the chance to farm the boss. On one of the last servers that I played, I had a chance to participate in such battle. 3 guilds, almost 400 players, fighting for 4.5 hours. We didn't win that time, but hear me out. It was insane, and it was amazing.
The question is, when risk becomes something that doesn't stop other players from impacting your gameplay in a negative, harassing, and repetitive manner, that the motivation to do that action is less about their personal advancement and more about impacting your gameplay, because when they elicit the response of anger or rage from the player, they feel a sense of accomplishment. That, in my opinion, is what griefing is.
In games with open world PvP, there are always players who complain about griefing. Some of them do it rightfully and some don't. So where is the line between competition and griefing, and what is it exactly? In my opinion, there is a number of criteria that may qualify certain action as griefing. The first question we need to ask ourselves when we get killed, for example, or encounter any other unpleasant situations is, what is that player trying to achieve? Is he actually trying to make me angry and ruin my gaming experience? Or maybe he killed me because he thought I might have some valuable loot. It's important to understand the reasons behind the actions of another player and see if there is any benefit for him. And if there isn't, then it may be a sign of griefing. Another important question to ask is, was there anything in the past that led to this situation? If you're a member of a rival guild, or maybe you raided someone's caravan, then don't get surprised when you face the consequences of your actions. Someone may have taken it to the heart and there is no point in complaining. But if there were no past interactions, then it may be another sign of griefing. Frequency and duration are 2 other factors that should be also taken into account. If a player repeatedly dedicates a lot of time to impact your gameplay in a negative way, that's definitely some extra points on a griefing scale. Now, imagine there is a player acting or gathering in a certain location. You went there as well and he killed you. The question is, did that happen because it was you, or where that player would attack any person who showed up there. If it's the latter, then it's definitely not personal because that player actually has a goal to protect his spot. Obviously, all situations are different, but I guess the more boxes are ticked, the higher is the chance that a certain action may be qualified as griefing. I'm actually curious what you guys think about it, so feel free to agree or disagree with me in comments. And now, let's get back to Steven talking about griefing.
The corruption system that's in Ashes of Creation, I believe, will stop that behavior to a significant degree, to the point where it is a very, very minor, if not at all, experience situation for many players, but the risk is still there.
Remember what I said previously about the corruption system in Lineage 2? Even though it wasn't perfect, the cases of griefing were still pretty rare. There were some role players with the amount of karma beyond repair, whose only purpose was to get as high PK counter as possible, but that was more of an exception. Skill dampening and severe consequences for going corrupt make me have a firm belief that cases of encountering such players will be rare.
That's something that requires testing. That's something that requires us in Alpha 2, in the betas, to see how we turn the dials of corruption, that the risk profile of corruption is high enough to reach the level of that deterrent, right? And that's something that we can't really opine on right now. Sometimes creators like to make very emphatic statements like, you will not like this system. This system will not be good for you. We don't know that yet, because what we are doing is we're innovating on the systems that have come before by enacting changes to that system which address the shortcomings of previous systems, and we have to playtest that first.
If you're a casual player or someone who has no experience in MMOs with open world PvP, and you're still not convinced that everything is gonna be fine, hear me out. The majority of things you worry about in life never actually happen, and same logic applies here. Even if we imagine that surprisingly something goes terribly wrong, there is still Alpha 2 and betas, so any system may go through multiple iterations and end up being perfect on launch.
It is my expectation that this system will perform very well in keeping risk alive, but significantly curtailing or deterring the ability for players to grief, because we all agree that griefing isn't good. Griefing's not fun. That's not the intended game design. And for players who work outside of the system to overly grief and harass other players in a way that is just not intended game design, those are actionable events. Those are potentially CS actionable events, right? You don't want other players just playing to ruin other players' game experience. And so if that's our intent behind the corruption system, you can be sure that we will refine that system with the many dials possible in corruption to better tune that so we achieve keeping risk but deterring griefing.
There is one thing that people often forget. When it comes to griefing, the developers are on our side, and Steven basically says that himself. Persistent griefing can lead to players quitting the game, negatively affecting the game's community and reputation. Moreover, it can create a hostile environment, discouraging new or less skilled players from participating. The effect of griefing extends beyond individual experiences, potentially harming the game's overall health and longevity. I doubt that it's a secret for anyone, and I'm pretty sure that Intrepid is well aware of it.
Other games have flagging and corruption systems, but they still have issues with users griefing each other. How is our flagging system and corruption system going to deter that?
Well, in a majority of cases, the experiences that I've had where the corruption system doesn't accurately address the potential for griefing is when the system has essentially failure points where the corrupt players can create a PK alt, right? That has the ability to be logged in or logged out at a location where you're protecting, let's say, the hunting ground, and you have the ability to support the PK alt through healing, and you might not flag by doing so. The alt has the same level of damage output and has no risk of loss there. We address that by having the skill dampening so that that PK alt is ineffective in PvP and doesn't have the ability to kill. You can return fire against a red target and not, go purple purple so that you're a valid target for PvP. The red targets will have to continue to accrue that negative corruption if they wish to defend themselves. There's a logout timer assigned for players who have corruption that's very significant. And even if they force disconnect their client during that time, it still persists in the world. There's the potential to drop your armor and gear, as we discussed. There's 4 times the death penalties that are accrued through negative experience that's gained, which means that even in the negative experience, it also applies potential skill dampeners and keeps them from accruing normal experience as well. There is an added, I mean, these are all things that I've changed in the system that help to safeguard some of those loopholes. Now, of course, as we said, we can't and we don't want to 100% remove the ability for that risk to be alive, for that risk to be realized. But what we do want to do is make sure that those occasions are few and infrequent and are not the majority of a player experience, let's say, in the open world. And we do so by incorporating all of those risks and costs into a decision to gain corruption and PK another player in the open world. It's just not going to be done often. And that is my expectation and opinion. It's also the goal of the system, is that griefing is not a viable option or play style. And as a result of that desire for the system, we will fine tune it in such a way through testing that that outcome is achieved. And that is the intent and purpose of the design.
If we analyze the corruption system from risk and reward perspective, it becomes pretty obvious that in vast majority of cases, the risks of going corrupt will significantly outweigh any potential rewards. Despite the fact that not all players always make decisions that are purely based on rationality, in vast majority of cases, they still do. There will be exceptions, of course, but those exceptions do not disprove the rule by any means.
How will we handle targeted harassment that happens in PvP? For instance, like maybe there's a streamer and now they're just being farmed, right? Or whatever that might be. There's many examples of that.
When a player takes their play experience to the point of harassing another player and doing so on a repetitive basis in order to diminish their play experience, and that is done, it is a breach of what our code of conduct is expected in the game. And it is a ticketable offense, right? If you are following around a streamer or you're following around a player and your intent is to keep them from playing the game or to force them to quit, that is a dirty player mindset. It's a bad player mindset. It's a griefer's mindset. It's not something that's desired in the ecosphere, in the community of Ashes of Creation. And as a result, it is a serviceable customer service situation, right? That is where warnings are given and actions can be taken against the account holder of an individual whose sole purpose is to disrupt and affect negatively the gameplay experience of others.
It's important for developers to provide a safe environment for streamers because it is a great way to attract new players. It may not be an easy task in MMO with open world PvP, so having an active customer support to deal with that issue is definitely a good idea. And it won't be helpful for streamers only, but for all players. I just hope that their report system will not be as bad as it was in New World, and there will be no option to mass report and ban someone for no reason. On that note, let's listen to Steven's final words on this topic.
I want to leave this subject on a parting note.
Yeah, go for it.
It's important to remember that the identity of what Ashes of Creation's core philosophical tenet is risk versus reward. And what that means is, while we will refine systems, we will iterate on systems, but we will never change the core identity of the intent and philosophical approach to what Ashes of Creation as an MMO brings to the MMO genre space that is not currently represented, or that has been a while since a game has represented it. And while the discussion is healthy and we want to make sure that we are relaying accurate and informed opinions to the broader community who might be less involved in following Ashes of Creation, we don't want to make assumptions. We don't want to relay information that's not accurate. We don't want to relay that intent that's not accurate. What we want to do is express that Ashes of Creation is endeavoring to build a risk versus reward centric PVX style game. And that intent and purpose will be delivered upon, and it will not change. We will fine tune, we will test, we will ensure that we reach the goals of the intent of these systems, but that core philosophy will stay the same.
If this video was interesting, please consider leaving a like and subscribing so that you won't miss the next one. I am Flanker, and I'll see you soon.